Felians, the second most common race of Sarah, find themselves in a similar proliferation to humans, spread amongst nearly every land due to their immense tenacity and stubbornness in enduring even the harshest climates. Felian fur varies significantly depending on the location. Colder climates create thick and warm coats, while warmer climates create thinner coats. Their elongated forearms allow for quadrupedal locomotion, hinting at a bestial ancestor of the modern Felian. The average male Felian stands well above the average human and is much stronger and more durable. The average female Felian is of similar height to the average male human, but retains the race's strength and resilience. Felian children in pubescence mature much more quickly than the other races, disregarding the masks, but suffer from a decreased average lifespan.
Hello everyone, and welcome to today's auction. We have for your purchasing pleasure fine stock from the various hinterlands of society.
The auctioneer, an old grizzled mouse with a bad back, paused here for effect. He glanced sideways at the boy beside him, as though making sure that he was following along. The boy stared back in fear and muted admiration, then looked down at the notebook he held and began flipping through its pages. Suddenly he stopped as something caught his attention, and he nodded at the auctioneer. Evidently pleased, the mouse continued.
First up on the block is a human from the outlying wastes, picked up by our Amite friends in one of their recent raids. As you can see, she's a lively young girl and hardly used.
The crowd chuckled in amusement.
She is certainly pretty enough to serve as a housemaid, or possibly a consort.
The crowd listened and spoke amongst themselves with obvious excitement. The slave trade in Elias was one of their chief industries, and this was already making out to be a premium haul. A human man and young Felian girl stepped through the crowd, both with an air of superiority about them. The crowd parted to let them pass. She was quite young to be out amongst that rabble, seeming only in her 7th or 8th year, but it was obvious by the way that she followed and spoke to her companion, who seemed in his 40s, and sharply dressed, that she held some dominion over him. I told you that you would make us late, stopping to buy those silly trifles. The man's shaven-lined face dropped into a familiar scowl. The girl laughed at his obvious frustration, but seemed somewhat bothered that she had detained them nonetheless. I will need to make a report to your mother as to why we missed the beginning of the auction. I am sure that she will be most displeased. The man looked for a moment at his feet, then turned his gaze towards the still-speaking auctioneer who had sold the girl, a young man, and was now offering to the crowd a middle-aged Felian woman who held a squirming, mewling babe. The man pulled out a worn leather notebook and began taking notes. Oh, and young mistress. Why, she interposed. Why, he continued, scowling. Do make yourself busy. I should not have you making my work partial, as our arrival was tardy. The girl smiled and looked about her in the crowded square, her eyes doing the wandering that her spry body yearned to do. She was neatly dressed in a blue sundress, trimmed with silver, and large silver baubles dangled from about her throat and from her ears, that twitched incessantly from the noise in the square. She tightly clutched a small doll to her chest, the trinket in question whose appearance had caused their tardiness. She smiled again as she surveyed the wide range of people that had come out from the auction. How she would love to walk and talk amongst them. The square itself was perhaps 75 yards wide and long, and was flanked on all sides by large, nondescript, dusty buildings that gazed lazily down upon them. The expanse was packed full of people of all sorts, from Elysian rabble simply spectating, to wealthy merchants and petty lords from Doros. The dress of the patrons ranged as widely as their occupations, with the rich garbed in opulent gowns and blouses, all bedecked with silver, and the poor garbed with rags and scavenged, disjointed clothing. The sound of the auctioneer's voice boomed deeply in the crowded square, rising above the general crowd noise, then was caught and carried away by the warm eastern breeze that blew and gusted about them. The place had the feel of a Yenian farmer's market, Waya realized. So carefree the day seemed. Her companion talked continuously while he wrote and observed the auction, and Waya tried her best to ignore him, preferring the view around them to the sights and sounds of the Elysian slave trade. The males of your race grow to nearly 7 feet tall on average. The girl's attention returned for an instant to her companion's constant stream of babble. Now, the Felians we have seen are, as a whole, slightly below average in regards to the usual lot that we have seen that last. He paused for a moment as he flipped to the relevant page in his notebook. 14 auctions. Unless something changes shortly, I should imagine that the better part of the real players will be leaving shortly. As though hearing the man's muted comment, the auctioneer suddenly paused and noted the crowd's general unrest, and motioned suddenly for his apprentice. The young human scurried to his side, his notebook held before him as though a shield, then nodded and picked his way to a different pin, further into an alley that led south away from the square. A moment later, 2 guards made their way out of the southern alley with a tall, incredibly muscular Felian male trailing behind them. The crowd stirred, their interest reignited by the Felian. This was a prime specimen, a slave for the pits, or breeding.
Ah ha ha, yes,
The auctioneer chuckled, his hands wringing themselves in the air before his mask.
as you can see, this is not your ordinary house cat.
The crowd was ripe as a yin pear with excitement, and the auctioneer plucked them. The guards forced the Felian into the center of the square, and the crowd nearest to him reached to paw and feel at him. The Felian reeled and fell backwards over his chains. The crowd roared with derisive laughter.
This specimen was picked up wounded on the outskirts of Envor.
The auctioneer continued, reading the crowd's energy.
We oversaw his complete recovery, of course. As he stands, he is
He glanced up at his apprentice's notebook and continued.
7 foot 3 inches in height and weighs in at 265 pounds of pure lean muscle.
The auctioneer was cut off as the Felian made a mad break towards the western edge of the square, as though hoping to somehow spring amongst them despite his shackles and so escape. The guards quickly wrestled the slave to the ground and began beating the struggling Felian. As he writhed on the ground with his captors, his eyes met with Waya's for but a moment, and she saw the rage there. The fear. The auctioneer laughed again.
As you can see, he is full of youthful vigor.
The crowd positively roared with laughter.
And his impressive size would make him a shoo-in for the pits.
The guards had apparently finished with the slave and raised him stumbling back on his feet. He wobbled dejectedly in the center of the square now. That one will sell for a high price, Waya's companion assured her. It isn't every day that you find such a specimen in the auctions. He smiled as he looked at the slave, and returned his gaze to his notebook. Waya nodded, but didn't seem to register her companion's comment. Her eyes were fixed on the now motionless slave, his once proud eyes darting, then downcast in resignation. His shoulders were slumped. He was broken. The doll dropped quietly from her hands. May we leave, Sino? I am feeling most unwell. She spoke without averting her eyes from the Felian. No, young mistress. He paused as though expectant, then continued, frowning. The auction will still be several hours, and I promised Mistress Facera that I would have you watch it in its entirety. Waya was silent. As the auction continued, Sino scribbled away happily in his notebook, though occasionally casting a sidelong glance towards Waya as he continued his stream of babble. She listened without hearing, silently watching. His eyes had been dark, she noticed, when they had dragged him limply away. The crowd murmured and bubbled happily about them, amazed anew at a female mouse from the outskirts of Jupe, whose bidding began at 1.5 pounds of silver. Waya watched all of this without seeing, heard all without hearing, her eyes blank, her doll lying forgotten at her feet.